Oh, yes. Admit One, My Reality podcast, where we provide a safe, caring, and non critical form of mental wellness through discussing, in part, the realities of mental illness. People in general find it difficult discussing mental health concerns, primarily because most people equate their mind with who they are, their self-worth, societal acceptance, and or rejection. Admit One My Reality podcast proposes that each person holds a ticket for admission into one's own mental wellness. You see, your mind is like a projector in the theater of life. Your thoughts create the screenplay. Your actions reflect your reality. Your reality is the admission ticket to mental wellness. Like, subscribe, and join in the podcast. Admit One, My Reality. And always remember, whatever you go through, you can mentally grow through. Good afternoon. This is Dave Jones, your host of Admit One, My Reality podcast, where we bring a wholesome discussion to try to, number one, take this sting and the stigma out of mental illness and yet bring awareness to mental health. And we can only do that by people coming in and sharing their particular stories as it aligns with the issues of mental wellness and mental illness to somewhat come to a resolve in your own mind. And that resolve could be a need for counseling, therapeutic intervention. That resolve could be an understanding better of yourself. And I'm so delighted today. I met a man that really grabbed my attention a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago now. Right at the Thanksgiving of 2024, we met, and Brother Jeff Taylor, the owner, founder of Triumphant Reentry Resources, he has given us some time today because he wants to share some things that I believe if the listening audience would take it in, it may not apply to you, but I believe everyone knows someone who knows someone that can relate to what he has to share today. Mr. Taylor, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Availing yourself today. Who is Jeff Taylor?
A servant.
A servant.
Complex,
Okay.
meaning I've experienced different things from homelessness to being around people with a lot of money and everything in between.
Now that's your A to Z.
Mm-hmm.
And let's hone in a little bit.
I'm a husband.
You share, and a husband. Let's not. We got to make sure your home stays happy. And a
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
But you shared something with me that caught my attention and it pricked my heart. About a month ago,
Okay.
we met at a luncheon.
Yes,
I believe,
sir.
a Thanksgiving luncheon celebration.
Appreciation luncheon.
Appreciation luncheon there at the Harris County jail within the reentry department.
Mm-hmm.
And as we started talking, you shared with me, I relate. I can relate. I'm here because I relate. Can you share with our listening audience what you meant, your story, as to how you relate to an incarcerated population, those that are the outcast at times seen as the undesirables, those that are looking for a second or third chance, those that are looking for needed help in the reentry of getting back acclimated, being with their families, a job, skill sets, abilities. How does Jeff relate?
Well, Jeff grew up basically doing criminal things, criminal mindsets, criminal thought processes, to during the 25 years of incarceration, all of that, from athlete, but thug in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Even military, still doing criminal things. Didn't change until I was sentenced to aggravated, well, actually arrested on a capital murder charge and sentenced to aggravated life.
Explain when you say aggravated life for those who may not be familiar with that criminalic terminology.
That means a minimum of 40 years of incarceration just to be considered for parole.
A minimum of 40.
A minimum of 40.
So if I can do my deduction and induction, you did not do your minimum.
No, sir.
You did not do your minimum.
No, sir. In the words of a friend of mine, but God.
But God.
Yeah. So I had a second trial, and that was removed, and I was sentenced to 50 years aggravated. So I had to do 25. That's what I did.
After 25 years, a quarter of a century,
Yes, sir.
the Jeff now compared to the Jeff then, is there a contrast? Is there a stark change?
Completely. I'm not the same person. There are elements of who I was from then, now. But I'm not the person who was selfish, short-sighted, arrogant, insecure, didn't know who I was. That person no longer exists. Understanding of what God created me to do,
Mm-hmm.
Who God is, why I'm in the position I'm in,
Mm-hmm.
all of those things are synonymous.
Okay.
It's part of a process. That 25-year of incarceration experience was 25 years of preparation for this.
Do you feel that it is your life now is somewhat providential, that the things that you experienced have brought you to who you are now, a
Absolutely.
better person, a better
Absolutely.
citizen?
Yeah, absolutely. Some may hear me say 25 years of incarceration and feel sorry for me. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. It's the best thing that happened for me.
Now, Mr. Taylor, I had an opportunity for 4.5, 5 years, right at 5 years, to work for the Michigan Department of Corrections.
Mm-hmm.
And I went from what they call in layman's terms a key
Turnkey.
turnkey, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
thank you, turnkey,
Mm-hmm.
to what they called a rum, an assistant rum, which was a counselor.
Okay.
And I was talking to a gentleman one day, and what you just said catapulted my memory back over 35 years ago. He said, Counselor Jones, this was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I don't blame anyone
Mm-hmm.
but myself. And then he paused and said, if I had to point a finger, I would point it at my parents for being too lenient on me
Hmm.
and giving me too much leeway. How do you process what that gentleman said?
That's his reality.
That's his reality.
That's not my reality. I was raised by a very caring father, but
Mhm.
very abusive mentally, emotionally, physically. but he was raised that way as well. So it's just
Generationally.
generational. Yes. Um, so that caused a strain in our relationship. So the streets. That's why the streets raised me. Even though I was there at home, I wasn't there.
You were there physically,
Yeah. Yeah.
but your totality of your who-ness and whatness.
Yeah, who I looked up to, who influenced me, were people in the streets. So, yeah.
What would you say to that person who's listening that is thinking, that sounds like me? His story sounds like me. Though I'm not incarcerated, but I got one foot on a banana peel and another foot on being caught and convicted because I'm living his pain in real time. What would you say to that person who's not connected to not a dad, but a father, not a daddy, not a baby daddy, but who's not connected to that father support, that father nurturing? Because when you shared that, I could see in your eyes, it's still a pain to even think back that I was raised as he was raised. You know, if people, I say to a lot of folks, if people knew better, they would do better. You shared with me, my dad was like this, but so was his dad to him.
Mm.
So
Well,
that person out there now who's going through what you've been through,
hmm
how does he come out of that vicious cycle?
understand that about that person. People can't give you something they don't have. My father couldn't give me the love and affection he never got, so he didn't have it to give.
Mm,
Um,
so
so,
true. Yeah.
so give that person grace. Get familiar with yourself. That's the best thing that I've ever done. I know who I am. I took the time to get to know me. Knowing me prevents other people defining me, who may not care
Mm,
about me,
mm.
who may not know me, who may be projecting their stuff on me. Um, so it's essential. Children, grown folks, older folks know who they are.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, I ask my dad, and I still ask these guys when I do group in the county jail. I ask them this one important question, like I asked my dad. He was 80 years old at the time. Who are you? He couldn't tell me.
Sound like a simple question, but it's very profound. Who are you?
Yeah, who are you? Not who do people say you are, not who do you think you are. Who are you? That introspection requires actions once you actually get to the point of knowing who you are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. When you actually understand who you are, that's the inception. That moves you. God takes that realization and moves you in the direction of getting to know who you are and him helping you deal with who you are to become a better person. And that journey never ends. I'm still on that journey of
Self
getting
actualization, self
deeper levels of
knowledge.
who I am,
Very much so.
dealing with myself in the struggles of my shortcomings. You know, people want to project, point fingers at everybody, deal with focusing on other people as opposed to dealing with self.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at peace with myself because I'm good with myself. All of those things, the traumatic things I experienced, all of the drugs, the womanizing, chasing money, all of those things were preventive measures to keep me from knowing who I am.
That's interesting you say that because you just cornered probably about 77% of urban America
Mm-hmm.
with that application
Mm-hmm.
and those attributes.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I'm hearing you say it got me nowhere in discovering self.
No, no, it's self-medicating. So it keeps you from knowing self. That's the way you run.
Like a sedation.
It is. It's a form of it. It's a form of it. I've been around people who are millionaires, like really, and their deals when they don't know who they are, they're still dealing with struggles themselves of getting to know who they are.
With the big house,
All
the
of that
car,
stuff. All of that stuff. Position,
position,
power.
power,
I was just looking at a site.
influence.
Because I find I locate resources
Mm-hmm.
for the people who are being released to help them in some way with
Fantastic.
job, support systems, food, clothing, because a lot of them are homelessness. They're
Mhm.
homeless, going back to homelessness, addiction, so the recidivism is high. And I looked at this one place that offers different forms of therapy to their clients, and their client base is those who are well off.
You smiled when you said that.
Because it's synonymous with the people who don't have nothing. They're still dealing with the same struggles. They're still dealing with the same psychological things. They're still struggling to know who they are and to deal with the trauma. We have so much in common that the powers that be want us to focus on the differences. They're minimal,
So we're more alike than unalike.
way more alike than we are
Doesn't matter
different.
your
It don't
socioeconomics,
matter
your financial
class, it don't
status,
matter race, it don't matter
religion.
none of those things are definition or differentiators that separate us. Those are the things, excuse me, that should bind us together.
How do we now? Now I want to. You're talking good, Mr. Taylor. I happen to be one of those agencies, Wellspring, that has purposed to plow out a path of hope and discovery
Mm-hmm.
with the incarcerated and also the children of the incarcerated.
Mm. Yeah,
And we've been doing it now under the Come to Me program, going on 23 years.
that's all right.
But one of the hurdles that never seems to go away, no matter if I was doing it in Tennessee or back in Michigan or in Kentucky, there is a trust factor or
Absolutely.
lack of trust.
Mm-hmm.
How do one get to bring down their guards of defense and be able to trust a guy named Jeff who they don't know, who's coming in and say, let me try to give you some resources. What? You know, because they come from game. They come from a street of game. And game knows game, right? As the people say, game knows game. So how do you get them to come out of that mindset to where I'm Jeff Taylor?
Authenticity.
I don't want anything
In a
from
word,
you.
authenticity. Authenticity. That's what appealed to you. Just being me. See, when you're okay with
You don't have to.
when you're okay
you don't
with
need a
yourself,
business card.
when
You
you're
don't need
okay
to show
with
them
your-
nothing.
See, when you're okay with yourself, it's evident. People know. Just like people know when you're fake.
Mm-hmm. You can't mask it. Particularly those who are serving on the other side. I was at a conference, Jeff, in Dallas, Texas, and it was on human trafficking.
Mm.
And one of the, I guess they call them internet police officers. They don't hit the street.
Mm-hmm.
They just every day they're behind the internet.
Mhm.
They're police officer who just
That's all they do.
traffic the internet, right?
Mhm.
And the gentleman shared with us the perpetrator can look at a potential victim or candidate for human trafficking and spot them without them opening their mouth or saying a word. It's what's void. This young girl here is a perfect candidate. They're not saying anything. They just may be walking through the mall and they can spot them.
Mm.
she's needy, she's vulnerable.
There's so many evidences.
Talk to me about that. Because you said authenticity.
Mm.
Authenticity trumps my degree. Here's my card. Here's this. And I may not get anywhere. Or that person that brings out all these particular certifications. But then here comes a Jeff Taylor. And the guy says, I trust you. I can talk to you.
I'm the person, I sat in the county for a total of 3 years on this because I had a wrongful conviction. So I had 2 trials. That's why it went from an aggravated life sentence to 50 years aggravated. And there are a whole lot of legal violations that I could speak to, but it was all God, so I'm not tripping on none of that. But I mention that because while I was inside, I looked for somebody like me to come in and talk to me.
Okay.
So I'm that person that I would want somebody to be when I go in and talk to them. I talk about my life. I talk about my experiences. I talk about my failures. I talk about everything from then until now. I'm just transparent. I don't do any airs. I don't do any pretenses. I don't do any of that. Life is too short for that. That's one thing I'm grateful for from my incarceration experience. My value of life and people is completely different. So it's easy to just go be who I am because I'm not trying to impress you.
Once you find out who you are,
It's all
as
tied
you
to
said
who you are.
earlier.
And so this is my understanding of spirituality. The closer you get to yourself, the closer you get to God. They're synonymous. You can't separate them. God reveals you to you as he's revealing him to you. So
And you said when you were on the other side, you looked for people that you could relate to, that had somewhat of a transference in their spirit, their who-ness, their whatness, their disposition. How do we get beyond then, Jeff, the whole certification of qualification, of acceptance through our higher halls of learning to where one comes out and they don't have a clue? Let me share a story, what I'm talking about.
Sure. Absolutely.
Maya Angelou has shared this story when she was in her living years, and so it's not hidden. She said when she was at the lowest ebb of her life, suicidal,
Mm.
she went to a psychiatrist. Now, Maya Angelou happened to be of the African American persuasion. The psychiatrist was a Caucasian male. And she started pouring out all of her hurts and pains to where it wasn't just tears, but excuse my vernacular, it was the snot tears. When you know when you're crying and
Yeah.
mucus start
This is
running.
deep.
It's deep. And she looked up at the psychiatrist, and it came to her. He doesn't have a clue to what I'm dealing with and who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Later, she turns around and writes the book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. That's what inspired her to write the book.
Mm-hmm.
I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And what the essence of that topic is, man can look at the parrot, the cockatoo, and say, what a beautiful bird. Now that bird ain't bothering nobody. But because man wants the bird in his home to repeat, Polly wants a cracker, he clips his wings and he puts them in a cage on parade, on display. But every morning, that bird will sing. You can take him out of his environment. You can take him from flight. But the song that's in him every morning, locked in that cage, that connection with your who-ness and your whatness with your God. He's singing. When you talk about being able to discern authenticity, you just shut the door to probably about 60% of the people who's trying to do what you're doing, but they don't have the authenticity, they don't have the understanding, they have the card. They got the degree on the wall. But when they walk behind the wall, there's no relativity, comprehension zero. And if that's true, and many of our employed staff who are in positions to help, in positions to bring about awareness and understanding and resources, if those are like the psychiatrist that Maya Angelou sat in front of, and they look up and say, she or he, they don't have a clue of what I've been through or what I'm going through or how to get me to where I should be. How do we change streams? How do we reverse that? How many Jeffs are out there?
Many. There are many. I have a lot of friends, a lot of associates, a lot of acquaintances on this side who've done a lot of time. And their passion is to make a difference, but we're not allowed. So I've
I
gone.
mean, break down. Let's stop and pitch tent there.
I've gone and offered myself to. I lived in Bryan College Station, and I went and talked to the directors of the probation department, and they wanted me in, but the protocol wouldn't allow it.
The system.
The system, and they weren't willing to take a risk to let me in, to talk to the kids.
If what you say is true, and I don't doubt it, you say there are many Jeff Taylors out there with a bleeding heart and a hungry soul.
And living right.
Those.
They're living right.
And they're living right. Incarceration was not just punishment. It really was a form of rehabilitation, whether it came within themselves or from God. They have been rehabilitated. Now they want to go and help rehabilitate the unability. But if the system is set up with the hurdles, help our people, help our community. Mr. Taylor, how do we get around, over, under those systematic hurdles?
There are a collective of things that need to be done. First of all, there needs to be real education about what's happening with the system, in the system, how the system works. That's one thing. That education will in turn change people's perspective of the truth that's really going on. The education will also show the connection of how that affects everybody in society, not just our community, but everybody in society. Yeah, it's more prevalent and obvious in the communities that are so-called minority communities, but it affects everyone. Just to
give us an example.
So, if someone goes and they steal something, and you get a lot of theft at this one department store, it looks like nobody's being affected by that because it looks like they're just stealing from that department store.
Isolated, right?
However, that theft, depending on how much is accumulated, is going to be affected by the amount of money they pay the insurance company who's insuring their goods. Which turns around and raises the prices of insurance for everyone.
It's domino. It's a domino effect.
So everyone is affected because those people who are stealing don't think that they're affecting anybody else other than that department store, nor do the people watching them steal think of the big picture. The same with incarceration. Incarceration is costing taxpayers. But if there is no real rehabilitation, than people who are coming out, who have not been taken upon themselves to rehabilitate because the system is not set up to rehabilitate in Texas. Can't speak for anywhere else.
What does the system need?
The system needs education.
Okay, now education is broad.
I'm
Let's
gonna,
let's break it down. Give me a syllabus. Give me
I'm gonna tell
run
you.
it down.
Just
What
give me
what
a
do we
moment. Just
give?
let me
What
get
do-
there.
what do we
I'm gonna
need?
give it to you. Just let me get there. So it requires education from people who, the policies governing who can and cannot speak to the people who are troublemakers, so-called troublemakers, people who commit crime. If we are allowed to speak to those people in real time, real conversation, real experience, it resonates. They don't just hear it, it resonates. That's one. So the policies, the education, um, the societal perspective, meaning when there was once upon a time the hard on crime.
Hmm.
Texas pretty much still has a lot of that in place. Let's be hard on crime. Okay, if you're being hard on crime, then you're being hard on people who are going to come out. You're going to see them at the grocery store. You're going to see them at the gas station. They went in not so bitter, but the system hardened their heart and calloused their hearts. Now they're being released. We have to change the economic parts of it, because the reentry part of it is you have people who are skilled to do jobs, but their past isn't passed. Their past never passes. So there we go back to the policies and the legislation. We go back to the people who are in charge, and the people who are putting those people in office have to be more informed so that they can make an educated decision.
Now, you said something that just sparked my interest of thought.
Mm-hmm.
Confucius said, "He that knows not and seeks to know, teach him. He that knows not and refuse to know, shun him. Get far away from him." Are we looking at those who know not and refuse to know, or those who know not and seek to know, but don't know where to go?
Both. We're looking at both. It's not an either or, it's all inclusive.
It's both.
It's always both. We make things in extremes, but they're a combination of both extremes and those who are hiding behind those extremes, or those who don't want to acknowledge that they're part of both of those extremes. It's always that.
If you had an opportunity to speak to our legislators in Austin, if there was a forum that was established where community forum where you could speak and share, like at a board meeting, what would you say to the panel, those that are in power, to change policy?
I'd ask them a question first.
And that question is,
Do you really want to make a change? Man, I'm gonna watch their body language. I'm gonna watch their expression. Doesn't matter what they say. I'm watching them. Because when you've been where I've been, you read people really well. Because I've had to read people to survive. My life is dependent on reading the room. So I can watch you and know all of the nonverbal communicators. I'm gonna pick up on those. Probably not perfectly, because I'm not perfect, but I'll be able to understand.
and you say, and let me just go back, piggyback, you say that those who have been through the trenches of incarceration, whether it be the recidivism of in and out, but let's say those that are currently a client or resident of incarceration, do they have that same insight that they can
No.
see a phony, they can fake?
Oh
they-
yeah, a
they
lot of
can- they
people
can
do.
see a
Absolutely,
fake.
absolutely. Yeah, that's 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 a survival skill.
That's a survival skill.
Yeah, a lot of people Prison is just the microcosmic atmosphere for what we were experiencing on the streets. It's just confined and controlled and structured, as opposed to when we. But the same skills you need to survive on the streets are a lot of the same skills that apply.
Behind the wall.
Because the principles are the same. Just that, like the principles that I'm applying now in life, I learned those principles and to apply those principles on the inside. It's no different. Just different geography, different participators, but it's the same.
How do we illuminate the mind of those who have a history of systemic criminogenic behavior and and you may say, well, look at what he's been through. Look at the family history. He doesn't know, or she doesn't know what they don't know. They just know what they've been taught, and what's not been taught has been caught in watching others within the neighborhood, the family. How,
Excuse me.
Jeff, how do we get a foothold into the process of change? Because sometimes change is slow and evolutional. But how do you get into the process?
We're in the process right now. Process started when people's minds started changing towards incarceration because they realized lock them up and throw it away. The key was not working. The crime rate has not gone down, it's gone up. The evidence, you can deny all the things that you want, but the evidence speaks for itself. So the evidence is there. So now, what is the solution? There's a collective solution that's necessary. And it involves many different areas of our society.
Now, let's talk about society, and let's talk about the civility within society.
Okay.
Where there are no laws, no rules, no governance, you have anarchism, an anarchistic society. Now, no country or no particular municipal within any city or state can operate where there is no civility. So if I can just propose, you're not against law and order.
Absolutely not.
So I don't want our listening audience to think that you're against law and order.
Absolutely not.
But within the civility of our going in and going out, coming in and going out, there's a red light, there's a yellow light, there's a green light. Right? But you know that from driver's training, what that represents. That's a form of organization within our traffic, right? So no one gets hurt. It works to help us all. Yep, why am I getting a ticket? You ran that red light, Mr. Jones. That was a no-no. You could have killed yourself, somebody else, or both. It's a violation.
Right.
Civility.
Right.
Are we looking at those who have no clue of civility, or are we looking at those who arrogantly oppose? And I know it's not that, like you said, cut and dry, black and white, but I'm trying to get a discussion going as to the high rate of recidivism. Is it just I refuse, or I don't know? Is it a willful push back on the system of civility? And now, of course, I'm sitting here as a therapist, mental health professional, and I know there's a mental health component in criminogenic behavior, from the genetics to epigenetics, all the way down to DNA, where we can trace back. However, that's a percentage. That's not the totality of willful criminal behavior and activity. But there is a mental illness component to it. But let's talk about those that are not suffering with audible hallucinations or visual or schizophrenic or bipolar. Let's talk about those who know what's right, know what's wrong, and choose not to do the right thing. How do you help? Is prison and our criminal institutions the place for that person who is willfully, unapologetically refusing to line up with civility? Where does that person go?
People are hopeless. That's why they commit crimes. They do. People are feel disenfranchised.
Hmm.
People feel disregarded, um, like they're not a factor at all. When the opportunities aren't there,
Okay.
then what else do you do? You know, there was a study, and because you're into um, neurology, I'm pretty sure you're aware of this study. Way back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe in the 20s, where there were 25 rats put in this environment. It was a comfortable environment. You know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Those rats were comfortable as opposed to the 25 rats that were put in an environment where there were no resources. There was no space. There was no food. There was no water. They turned into, because at first it wasn't that way. It started out with them having the creature comforts and them just being okay. But as those creature comforts and the necessities of life were removed, they turned cannibalistic.
And here's where we get the term rat race.
And that's where the rat race comes from. It's exactly where it comes from. And you can switch those roles. I don't care what race you are on this, what so-called ethnicity you are. On this planet, if you take and put any ethnicity in those types of circumstances, they're going to do exactly what everybody else is doing.
Jeff, you know what this reminds me of? If you speak in truth to power, um, I'm reminded of the movie with Eddie Murphy, Trading Places.
Absolutely. See how it changed? See how it changed?
I'm reminded of the movie Trading Places. If you haven't seen the movie Trading Places, it really aligns to
The
the
principle.
education and the principle
Mm-hmm.
that Mr. Taylor is presenting here today. Um, a shift in one's environment. Uh, Desperate people do desperate things.
Absolutely. But the, there has to be a systemic change as well. You talked
I
about
believe
change.
that. Yes, yes.
There has to be a systemic change, and we have to get back to transparency. I'm talking about when the people are put in governmental offices and they say they're representing the people. The government requires that nonprofits be transparent about how they handle whatever funds that come in.
Fiduciary funding.
Whatever fiduciary funding comes in, whatever finances are given to that organization,
Open book.
they have to be open. Well, why can't we have that in government? If they truly are serving the people, the interest of the people. So there's so many things on so many different levels that must change in order for a real change to come. That's the first question I would ask. Do you really want change? Well, if you really want change, then this is what we need to do in order to make it happen.
I'm going to share something with you, Jeff, and this is something that's been passed down, particularly in my family. The knowledge that change starts at the grassroots level.
Hmm.
Then it becomes a voice of the concerned. Then it reaches the ears of those who are in power.
Hmm.
But it starts at the grassroots level. I'm reminded of a open intersection where I'm from, back in Muskegon, Michigan, and everyone, no, well, a good number of neighborhood residents would say somebody needs to come out and put a yield sign or a stop sign. We're almost hitting each other with this open four-way intersection, right? So they had some fender benders, they had some vehicular accidents, but it didn't change until a young girl got hit on the bike and went into the ICU. Then the cry became louder, more voluminous, and caught the ears of the city officials who could make change. And you know where
Because
I'm
we're
going.
reactive, we're not proactive.
You know where I'm going. And then you look up and there's a stop sign. It's a four-way stop sign.
Absolutely, because we're
But why did
reactive.
it have to cost a young girl to almost lose?
Because we're reactive. We're not proactive. We're very reactive as a society.
I want to do this because you have a high level of intellect, not only in the book knowledge, but Taylor, there is knowledge that many don't have that you have.
Well, thank you.
Because that's a knowledge that you can't get from the higher halls of learning. I say this as I go through life and teach at different universities and mentor and supervise interns. They'll walk into my office, they'll look around, they'll look at certain certificates and diplomas. But I'm so mindful to let them know before they leave, I never get my education mixed up with my schooling. What you looking at is schooling. But schooling and education are two different things.
Absolutely.
I can sit here and tell for truth to those who are listening that I'm looking at a very educated man.
Thank you.
A very educated man. That's why I asked the question, how many Jeff Taylors are out there?
I don't know. What I have comes from God. You know, I can't, people will hear that as a cliche, but for me, it's no different than somebody, a doctor saving somebody's life on an operating table and then them praising that doctor, or a lawyer saving somebody from a big sentence. God saved my life. And I'm unapologetic about telling the world God saved my life. I am who I am because of God.
That goes back to a word that you shared earlier, authenticity. You have helped me to better understand a different approach to this resolve that we're both seeking. And that resolve is to help those who are on their way and those that may be on the other side of the wall to come into reentry and never go back. Brother Taylor, let me share this with you, because certainly this synergy of concern is reaching me talking with you today. Every year we have what's called the Grammys, the Academy Awards, the Stellar Awards. And those particular forums are to put on parade those who won Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Screenwriter. But today, I think it's appropriate to put Jeff Taylor on parade. Though those in Hollywood may be acting, he gets the Academy Award for genuine authenticity. Mr. Taylor, will you come back if I can set up a forum with some of our people of power, our people that hold positions within our community, because they really need to hear what you shared with the common, the laity on today. They need to hear someone who's been on both sides of the fence, someone who's not been voted into best actor, best supporting actor, but someone who has the authenticity and have been taught by the best teacher, and that's life, the best classroom you can get in. And when life teaches you, the funny thing about when you're in that schoolroom of life, you can't withdraw. There is no other class.
Yeah.
You have to die. That's the only exit ticket that you have. Brother Jeff, man, I appreciate you, man.
Well, I
You
appreciate
my
it.
Denzel.
I appreciate it.
You my
I
Denzel.
appreciate it.
And I want you to come back on another form of Admit One My Reality if you're willing. And let's get some political leaders in here. Let's get some people who can make change to where they have a form, a think tank, a form of a receptivity. I think you shared it best. You said, I can look at a person and tell if they're real or not. We need someone to come in with not an agenda, but open mind. Because you have something that I don't have and many others don't have.
Mm.
It's one thing to go to a funeral when someone's mother passes away
Mm-hmm.
and walk up to them and say, I know how you feel because I lost my mother. But when you walk up to a person and your mother is standing next to you and say, I know how you feel, you can't possibly know how that person feels.
Yeah.
Your mother's standing right there.
Yeah.
You're not talking about what you read.
Yeah.
You're talking about what you know.
True story.
We're going to come back and have part two. Jeff Taylor, I think we just can't leave it right here. We have to have a part two. And he's amenable to bringing some of our finest, our boots on the ground, change makers within our communities, be it our mayor, be it one of our representatives, be it someone who has a established entity that they're trying to do what Mr. Taylor has proposed needs to be done. And we're going to bring back him and others for a part two to Admit One, My Reality. I'm your host, Dr. David Jones. It's been a pleasure again
Yes, sir.
spending time with Jeff Taylor. I
Pleasure's
am
all mine.
proud to know the pleasure is mine. You have educated me and brought me to a higher awareness and opened up the illumination of my mind on some more ways that we can get to this resolve. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Take care. Until next time.